Hopefully this will work. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for attending, and thanks Javier for offering to kind of moderate and answer or moderate audience questions. And I'm looking forward to this. So today we're going to be talking about managing LabVIEW projects with virtual environments. And so this is kind of exciting. A lot of LabVIEW users are probably familiar with virtual machines and using that type of virtualization technology. And what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of how people have used virtual machines in the past and how a possibly new concept for LabVIEW developers, virtual environments, how those can kind of go a step beyond in helping us manage our LabVIEW projects. I'm really excited to dive into this. And we're going to be showing you guys some new VIPM and software tooling that makes this really exciting and easy. Okay. Everybody sold? This technology we're going to be demonstrating today uses VI Package Manager and some other software we've added on top of that. You can get VIPM by going to vipm.io. I'll be demoing it here today. So let's look at the background of why this presentation even exists and what we're going to be talking about today. So NI recommends installing libraries underneath LabVIEW. And this is largely historic. There were some design choices made around where to install things, like your personal libraries or add-ons, third-party add-ons. And typically, this has been under the vi.lib folder or userlib, instr, instrumentlib. And when we install things under there, they show up in the palettes and they integrate with QuickDrop. And there's some other locations under LabVIEW where add-on tools get installed, such as project providers, things that add items to the tools menu, and even right-click type extensions for LabVIEW. And so that works kind of okay for test and measurement stations. And historically, back when LabVIEW was first created, this was a long while ago, back in the 80s and 90s, and there wasn't a whole lot of sharing code. This was even really before a lot of people started using source code control. And this approach of installing your reuse stuff under LabVIEW works kind of okay for a test and measurement station. A test and measurement station, if you're doing development of LabVIEW code on the actual test or measurement station, chances are you're not going to change the versions of the libraries that you're using very frequently. And you probably are not going to be working on different projects with multiple libraries. And many of you who are actively using LabVIEW here are like, you're crazy, Jim. I want to do that all the time on my test stations. And yeah, you're right. Really, software engineers do want to do this a lot. But if you think about like a scientist or engineer who's building one big system, they haven't been screaming for this feature since day one. And as a lot of people know, we've been getting a lot of requests for features to improve this. It's very cumbersome to switch between projects if they use different versions of libraries, which is nearly always the case. And so, especially over the past year or two, we've been getting a lot of requests to make this easier. This approach of installing stuff underneath we'll call it your global LabVIEW environment, it doesn't really work well for software engineering. We really want to know which versions of libraries we have installed. We want to be able to change them quickly, work on different projects. So everybody's probably sold on the fact that that's hard. Javier?
I was going to say that, I'm sold, and definitely we've seen a lot of people requesting features like what we're going to show. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Excited.
Yeah. For a long while, VIPM has had a feature called VI Package Configuration Files, these VIPC files. And these help you keep track of which packages are on your project. And VIPM can scan your project to find out which packages are actually being called. It can save these in a file. It can even save copies of the packages inside your VIPC. And this is a great way to kind of bundle up with your project a configuration file. Developer lab users are recommended to check this file into source code control, and when they open up their project, to apply that configuration, and VIPM makes sure that your packages are installed in LabVIEW and you can start working on the project. That still, doesn't solve all the problems. It takes time to install those packages when you're switching, and if you want to work on two different projects, like in the same day, switching between projects is kind of a pain. Many developers have started to employ virtual machines, which are basically tools like VMware Workstation, Parallels Desktop, and VirtualBox are just some examples of virtual machine software. So the idea is that this is a software program that virtualizes a whole computer, like a whole Windows computer, a whole Mac computer, or Linux computer, and it runs inside your host computer. So your laptop could basically host several different virtual computers that each have their own virtual hard drive and have their own stuff installed in them. It's really powerful and awesome technology. A lot of these support things like snapshotting and branching, so you can save a virtual machine in a certain state, and you can branch from that and create two different branches for different projects and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, and it works great in a lot of cases. The real nice thing, if you're using this for your projects, is you create one virtual machine for each project, or maybe a different branch, snapshot branch for each project, and then you don't really have to install or uninstall anything when you switch projects, which is nice. You just hit go and you start working on the project right away. They're still painful. They're large in size. So these virtualize the whole computer, basically, the whole operating system. And there's other technologies which are kind of go a step further, meaning they virtualize less of the system, which are called container technology, like Docker and others, which are, people are starting to seriously investigate and consider these for use with LabVIEW. They still virtualize. They don't virtualize the operating system, but they're still relatively heavy, especially for Windows containers and trying to install LabVIEW. And people who've been playing with this technology, investigating it, are bumping up into various kind of pain points. But it's moving forward, and I suspect that more people will start doing this as more people start complaining to National Instruments to get those hurdles out of the way. Anyways, I'll move forward. It's still pretty painful. These virtual machines are very large in size, like, tens or hundreds of gigabytes. And so it doesn't make it practical to share these, like share one with your team or keep that in source code control. And also you have to license and activate the operating system. So that's still kind of a pain. All right. So this gets to the exciting part of the project, Javier, or the presentation, which is a new project we've codenamed Project Dragon. And what I will say is you can sign up today at this URL, bit.ly/Project Dragon with a hyphen in the middle there. And you can sign up and you can receive notification when we have a beta version available. Might be an alpha. But we're going to be keeping people posted so that they can download this, try it out. Everything that I'll be showing you today. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what this is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to just demo it for you. I'll kind of stop bullet by bullet and demo the software for you. So the main idea is that it uses VIPM to help you manage your LabVIEW projects. So let's take a look here. It's not running currently. I'm just going to launch this here. And what we'll see is it's going to open this dialog here, which is the front end for Project Dragon. I'm going to let that load, and I'll come here and show you the next bullet point. So the thing everybody's been asking for is the ability to install packages underneath the project source folder. And what we've done with Project Dragon and VIPM, what we're calling 2021, which we're demoing, is we've added the capability to install all of the packages into a LabVIEW virtual environment that exists underneath your project folder. So the idea is when we install files into LabVIEW for your project, we're actually installing it into a little virtualized LabVIEW environment under your project folder. And there's still some details there that we're working out, and it's working really well. I'll show you guys some demos of it installing stuff, showing up in the palettes and stuff like that. So this is pretty cool stuff. So with Project Dragon, it sits on top of VIPM. We can see here it's refreshing package database. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to start out by opening LabVIEW. And I'm going to go through kind of a typical workflow of how somebody starts a LabVIEW project and then gets to a point where they want to use some packages that they've built or that they love to use that the community has built. I think my computer is running slow right now because I've got the video running, and then also too I'm doing some screen recording. Okay, so let's save this project, and I'm going to go here into GLA Summit and call it. I got a project 1 in there. Let me just. I'm going to delete project 1.
And I think one comment, Jim, I think just because of the refresh rate of the video, just gotta do things a little bit slower than you would usually do them.
Okay, yeah, so thank you very much for that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so we'll put this in a folder called Project 1. And so now we have our LabVIEW project, and we'll add a VI. And we'll save this here. We'll call it Project 1 main. Cool. So we typically get to this point and we go into the functions palette or quick drop, and we're looking for, like, let's just say like an OpenG VI that we like to use a lot. There's one I like called random number in range, but it's not there. So what we now want to do is we want to install some packages. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new project here. And then I'm going to go to C, GLA Summit. I'm just going to browse to my LabVIEW project file. And
I think we couldn't see the click, but you clicked on the new project under the Dragon welcome screen, right?
Yes, I did. I clicked on new project. It opened a file dialog. I just browsed to my LabVIEW project that I had just created on disk. And it's showing me a dialog here to just choose some options. I'm just going to choose the default. It found what LabVIEW version that project was saved in. And then it's also going to install packages under the project folder, which we talked about earlier. So what it's doing right now is it's initializing a virtual environment for the project. And in a second, this will become enabled and we'll be able to do things like install packages. So we now have a virtual environment, and that's actually saved underneath the project folder. I'm just going to explore to that right now. And you'll see here we've got a little virtual environment. We also have a little .vipm meta file where it's going to store some information. But now basically what we'll do is we'll choose to add a package. And I'm going to install the OpenG numeric library because I like that one. And we'll let it go through its installation process here. Looks like it doesn't need to download it, which is good. And you can see it's extracting stuff into this lv.lib folder. So inside of our virtual environment, there is an lv.lib folder where it's going to put all of our VIs. And one thing I will say is we've worked hard to try to keep some compatibility with how LabVIEW does things and the way that this virtual environment works. Yeah, so now we can choose to open this, and you can see it popped that open here. And underneath our functions palette now, here we have a project one subpalette, and that contains our OpenG VIs, which is pretty cool. And we can start using this on our project. There's our random number guy, and this guy just outputs a random number between low and high.
And I think it's worth pausing there just to make sure that people see this, that basically because you're working on the project one, you get this new section called project one parentheses LabVIEW virtual environment, right? And that's where you would see everything that you install under this specific project.
Yeah, absolutely right. So this is a special palette for all of the VIs, all the libraries that got installed under that virtual environment. Exactly right. So the other thing too that we can do here, oops. What did I want to show here? I could install another library. And then what we're going to see here in a minute when it refreshes the palettes is that we'll have the OpenG Boolean library available to us as well. Okay. It's refreshing the palettes. And here we have those two libraries. So that is good and interesting. The other thing too, one of the reasons why people want the ability to install these packages underneath the project folder is really they'd like to be able to develop multiple LabVIEW projects that each may use different versions of packages. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that might look like here. So I'm going to close this. Close these here. And I'm going to open up a new project. I'll call this project 2. Okay. Okay, so there's our new project. I'll add a new VI to it. Project 2 main. And so if I go in here and look in the palettes, we can see that we don't have anything installed. So those other packages that we installed into project 1 aren't there. So that's a really important thing to notice. And so if we want to install stuff, we're going to go through that same workflow that we went through. I'll go ahead and add a new project to the project dragon here. You can see it finds that default information. It's creating a virtual environment for the project. Then when it's done, we'll be able to install a package. Okay. And then for this one, let's see, some other good OpenG stuff. I'll install the error library. And what's nice about, so the LabVIEW project environment is, what's nice about using the project environment is anything that's opened up inside of that project, even if it calls VIs with the same name, it will open up, it'll namespace them. So it'll actually, if you have two different projects, they can actually have the same VI name open in memory in their own kind of application space. And I think what I'll do is I'll just show you that in action by also installing the Boolean library. So project 2 is going to have the error library and the Boolean library. And then what I'm going to show you is how we can actually have the same VI name open in each project, but each project has its own that has a different location on disk.
And I think, yeah, that was one of the questions, and I think hopefully this answers the question. And the other one was related to, can you install globally at the same time as installing locally? And I know we've discussed that internally.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You could.
Yeah, actually, you can. I'll show that in a minute here. Okay, so there's project 2. I'm going to also open project 1 here and show that we have these two side by side. So project 2, I'm going to here open, drop the Boolean trigger VI, wire something up so it's broken, and then I'll just drop the error builder here. Okay. So here, if we look, I'm showing like all the details here. So I've clicked on the show optional terminals and full path. And the reason why I wanted to do that is to show you that when we're working inside project 2 here, it says project 2 down in the lower left, it is calling a VI that's in the project 2 virtual environment Boolean library. If I close this, I don't have to close it, I could leave that open. If I close that and grab the Boolean trigger VI in project 1, you can see that it's calling the one that's here, I'll go slower, that's underneath project 1's virtual environment. And the real cool thing here is if I show you opening both at the same time, if I hover over project 2's Boolean trigger, you can see up here it's loading the one for project 2. And if I hover over the one inside the project 1 VI window, it's calling the one in project 1. So these are pointing to different VIs on disk, and we can actually have different versions of the same library installed in different projects, and we can have them open concurrently. So this is really, really cool. This is a really big feature that people have been wanting. And just to reiterate here, you can see when I'm working in project 1 VI, I have a project 1 subpalette. And then if I come over here to project 2, I've got a project 2 subpalette. So I'm curious if there's any questions from the audience at this point. I'll just kind of pause there because that's a lot to take in.
So hopefully that answers her question about would you switch palettes, which you just showed. There were some questions about cross-linking from Philip. So hopefully that answered your question. So he's saying, what happens if you try to copy a sub VI from project 1 into a VI of project 2, right? So you would take.
That's a good question. Should we give it a try?
We'll try.
Let's try it. Will it blend? Let's see. Have you guys seen those? Will it blend? Okay. No. It's where we throw random stuff into the blender. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and keep in mind I have no idea what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to copy the project 2 VI, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this, copy it into my project 1 folder. Okay, so this is a common thing that people do. People working on projects will say, "Oh, I built this amazing VI. You know, it calls an OpenG Boolean VI, and it's totally reusable. Let's use it in our project." So I just copied it over, and these are both like at the same level too, right? So we might think that that's kind of dangerous potentially from a cross-linkage perspective. I'm going to drag project 2 main into my project 1. I'm going to open it. Let's see here. Find VI. Oh, so this is okay. This is okay. What's happening here is it's saying project 1 does not have the OpenG error library installed. Right? So that was okay because we don't have it installed. But here we can see we're working inside project 1. So now this project 2's main VI that we copied over into project 1 is correctly linking to the VI, the reuse VI that's installed under project 1. That's what we expect. Well, that's the correct desired behavior that we would want. So did that answer the question that it works?
Hopefully.
Okay.
So I think so. We have a few more demos, right? But so one of the questions was, do we need to have a project file to be able to use this?
Let me think about that. So it will work without the project file. It works better with the project. So if we were not working inside of the LabVIEW project environment, we absolutely would not be able to open those 2 different main VIs because we would have cross linkages that occur because LabVIEW would have only one kind of namespace. So it's not advised. But to answer your question, I can close these here. And if I go into project 1 here, like I can open project 1 main, and I'm opening this project 2 main. These are all inside that project 1 folder. This is just the project 2 main that I copied over. It still can't find the OpenG error VI. And we can see here, it opens fine. It's linked to the stuff here under project 1. I think what's happening right now is it's not activating the palette right now. I think that's possible, but it's just kind of a corner case that we're not addressing right now in the palette generator. So yeah, you can work on your project without it being in a LabVIEW project.
Right, and maybe the last question before we show the other use case. So somebody's Chris Clark is asking about where is the drag on context with respect to the 2 LabVIEW project contexts. So I don't know if I fully understand that question.
Maybe. So I would ask for clarification by what do we mean by a dragon context? That's nothing that we've defined. So I'm guessing that there's some assumptions maybe or questions that are being asked about, like, how does this work? So the Project Dragon is not inside LabVIEW's context, but it has a reference to LabVIEW and it can work within LabVIEW. So some of the magic here is, so LabVIEW's not open right now, right? But Project Dragon is. If I double click on this project, it knows which version of LabVIEW this project is using, and it will open that version of LabVIEW and then open the project file in that LabVIEW version. Here, let's see. Oh, it's doing it. Okay, there. So it launched LabVIEW and then opened the project in that LabVIEW context. And so all of its operations, it kind of knows how to talk to LabVIEW. Did that answer your question, Chris?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, wonderful.
Cool. So maybe there's a few more questions, but maybe let's jump to our other demo, and then maybe that clarifies some of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I think the other thing I just wanted to mention, so we can uninstall a package too here just by clicking on the X here. I'm not going to do it right now because these projects are using it. And then let me see my next slide. Okay, so multiple LabVIEW projects can even be open at the same time. So we talked about that. That's really, really huge and cool. And there are some real use cases where people have like a distributed system, for example, and they may have a LabVIEW project for their host computer that runs on their desktop application. And it may be communicating with RT or FPGA code. And the FPGA application may have its own project. And it may use different versions of the same libraries. And that may be desirable, for example, so that we don't have certain VIs locked while we're doing development. And it's also nice to be able to version control the libraries independently between those two targets. So it is desirable to have multiple LabVIEW projects open at the same time in real world LabVIEW situations. Okay, so this Project Dragon, one of our goals is we want to provide essentially a one-click setup experience when checking out LabVIEW projects from source code control. And I'll show you basically what I mean here. So let's look at project 2. And we'll also maybe talk a little bit about what does that even mean, and when we talk about integrating with source code control. So I haven't talked a lot about this yet. If I double click dependencies, I'm just going to do a little. Let's see here. Hopefully this opens. Here. Open the package configuration editor. Oh, we didn't configure it. It should be doing something automatically right now, but got a new build of the software. The demo's not. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the GLA Summit folder. It should have had this created automatically, but it didn't. I'm going to create a VIPC file, and then I'm going to tell Project Dragon about it. Project Dragon will find these automatically when you add your project, and it'll even make it and manage it transparently behind the scenes for you. So what we're going to do now is we'll add these packages to our configuration. Go. And so what we'll typically do when we are working on a project is we'll go into our source code folder and we'll check this into source code control. And so what we're going to advise people when you're using this is that virtual environment folder. Typically, we will not check that into source code control. So, we could have a big discussion about, whether that would be a good idea and in which circumstances. I will just say in some regulated environments, it may be advantageous to check that into source code control. Some people actually check their entire LabVIEW install folder into source code control for some applications, but generally we'll just ignore that virtual environment folder. What we will commit to source code control is the .vipm file. I'm actually in the wrong folder here. Okay, so we can see this .vipm file. Now this is all still subject to change, including the file extension. We can see that it contains some meta information about the project. But let's imagine that we just checked this out from source code control, and this virtual environment folder, which you can see, it's a couple hundred K. It's got, stuff installed under userlib. That's where all the OpenGVIs are. So let's imagine that we don't have those installed. So I'm going to delete that. And so we check it out from source code control, and I'll get rid of it here from the project dragon list. So project 2 isn't in there. And then I'll just double click or right click, open the project.
Just go a little bit slow so that we can actually see it.
Okay. So what I did is I deleted the virtual environment, and I double clicked the .vipm file, which is kind of that meta file that Project Dragon is using. And so it's creating a virtual environment right now for that project, which you could see it actually created the LV-VEMV folder. And it's asking me, there are required packages for this project that need to be installed. Would you like to install these packages now? So I'm going to say yes. And what we can see, and this is kind of new for people who are familiar with the VIPM kind of classic interface here. That's kind of a new project icon. That's just showing us that the virtual environment's active, and it's now showing us a dialog asking us if we want to install those packages. So I'm going to say yes. And what it's doing is it's installing all of the packages that are inside of that package configuration file defined by the configuration file before it opens the project for us. And in a lot of ways, it's really nice for us to be, let's say, outside of LabVIEW, one level up from LabVIEW. One nice reason is a lot of us, I know I do, I develop in multiple LabVIEW versions. You can see I've got LabVIEW 2009, 2015, 2017, 19, and then I have 32 and 64-bit LabVIEW 2020. So it's really nice for me to have a listing of all my projects, regardless of what LabVIEW version they're in, and a central place that I can switch between those two. And then another nice thing about us living kind of one level above LabVIEW is that we can actually manage the installation of things. We can make sure that we have everything we need before the projects open. That's not really possible to do if we're an extension inside of LabVIEW. So
just to recap what you just did. So, for example, the use case is I have some code on GitHub.
Right.
I send you the link.
Right.
You cloned it, so now you have your own copy.
Right.
There's no virtual environment there yet.
Right.
But you just by double clicking the VIPM file, then VIPM and Project Dragon took care of installing all the dependencies and even asked you if you wanted to install them before you made a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And that's a lot. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We can't. I can't hear anything, but I assume that maybe there's some clapping behind the scenes there. Some happy audience members, at least.
So one of the questions is about the VIPC files.
Yeah.
Do you commit VIPC files to source code control? And I guess, there's an answer that we would give even aside from Project Dragon. But
yeah. So my answer would be, you should commit the .vipc file to source code control. Some of this will be evolving a little bit. It's going to be a lot more transparent to users, some of the steps that I did. So for people who've been using VIPC files, and let me see if it should work now if I double click this. There we go. So it's opening the VIPC file. One thing that's kind of nice is it's really nice. You can right click and choose to store packages inside of the VIPC file. So if I do that before I save, this, if we look, the VIPC file is like 3K. We can't really see too well there. It's 3 kilobytes. And then if I save with the packages inside, you can see it jumps to 87K. And so what it did is it just put copies of those packages inside the VIPC file. So now, even without an outside network connection to the internet, if I just have my project folder, maybe I checked it out from my my server that's on my corporate network. I don't have internet access, but I can check things out from our server. The VIPC file has the packages inside of it, and so VIPM has everything it needs to install everything into that virtual environment. And this is actually, it's not quite as important with LabVIEW, but the virtual environment may change depending on which platform I'm on. If I'm on 64-bit versus 32-bit, when those VIs save, if the VIs aren't configured to separate compiled code from source code, the bytecode or the object code for the VIs, will get saved with the VI. So it's actually kind of nice to not have this be in source code control, because each kind of platform or environment will actually compile that stuff and save it differently. So that's just something to note.
Right. One thing, and there's a few people that have asked a similar question. How about multiple project files for one virtual environment?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny because me and Philippe talked about this a few days ago, right? And we were trying to figure out what's the best solution. So
absolutely. So it supports it right now. What you can currently do is you can actually have like a different .vipm file for each of your projects. So if I had inside here, I'm just going to call it project 3. It's probably going to crash on me when I do this like live without testing it, right? And then I'm going to create another copy of this VIPM file and call it, project 3. And then I could hand edit it. I'm going to risk everything here, and then I'm going to point this at project 3. Was it that easy? Maybe. And it's pointing to the same virtual environment now. And so now I think I can open project 3. Oh, I didn't change the name of the project that's in this .vipm file. So that might actually confuse it here, but I think I can pop this open and just call it project 3 or whatever I want here. So these are both using the same virtual environment, and we're currently evaluating what all the different features we want to have inside of this tree. We may support having 2 different project or multiple project LabVIEW project files in the same project, but each of these may, if it's using the same virtual environment, it's the same packages installed. So it seems like it would be natural to support multiple project files. And I've seen lots of systems where people do have multiple project files for one LabVIEW project.
Right. So I guess we're still trying to figure out what the final product is going to look like. But so right now you would see, you can open them independently. One caveat would be if you remove packages from within one project, then it will remove them from all, right? So that will be one caveat.
Yeah.
The other, so hopefully for the several people that asked that question, let me know if that answered it. The other question that several people asked was about, say that you are trying to install a framework like DQMH or something that uses scripting and some of that magic.
Yep.
How is this going to play with those frameworks?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So we're currently looking at ways. There's a few different ways that we can do it, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. So one thing that I think is going to happen I don't want to speak in absolutes, but so one solution is to separate out the library components that a user will be calling directly that get built into their application, and then to have a package with that library, and then for those components to be installed into underneath the project folder. And the nice thing about that is they can just open the VIs and everything is linked directly inside the virtual environment. So we're still working out some of those questions about how things can hook into, let's say, like the right-click menus of LabVIEW or the tools menu. There's a couple different approaches. So I think this is also, a time to mention here. I'm going to pop open VIPM. So basically, VIPM is maintaining a sort of a package installation database for that virtual environment. And we can see that in LabVIEW 2020, we have the Project 3 virtual environment active. If I close that here in the VIPM window, it's now going to be showing me what's installed into the global environment. Mm-hmm. And so, one possibility is, that we have a different package for the IDE extensions, and that gets installed globally. And then, Project Dragon will, can make sure that if somebody's going to work on a project and actually wants the IDE tools installed globally, that those are ready to go. So there are some aspects of this that still, we are going to have to work within some of the limitations of LabVIEW. And there's some other solutions that we're evaluating behind the scenes for that. So that's a good question. And we've already been doing some thought about, like, for JKI State Machine has the same challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was going to mention that we're going to have to figure it out for the JKI State Machine, and we have some ideas. One thing
and Javier, one thing I was just going to plug too, that if anybody has like questions, concerns, ideas, use cases, they can, we'll show them that link again where they can kind of sign up to get more information, but we definitely want that feedback of what people kind of care about. What were you going to say, Javier?
I was just going to say that maybe let's talk just for a minute or two about that little window that we showed for Project Dragon and how easy it is to install packages from there. Because I think it's a really cool workflow. It is really minimalistic, and I would like to get your thoughts on, like, for your personal use, how do you envision combining the Project Dragon window with your LabVIEW project window?
Okay. So you're talking about this little window here?
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't really prepared for this question, but just kind of thinking about it. I'm always working on lots of different projects, and I jump back and forth. So I want this feature just as bad or more than anybody else. So I love seeing, like, all my most recent projects that I'm working on from a high level list, or I like to be able to, like, double click on it. I don't want to have to worry about what LabVIEW version my project is in. I just want to double click it, and I want it to basically, automatically open for me and then tell me what LabVIEW version it is and launch it in that LabVIEW version. So I would, for me personally, like, this is going to be like my, one click to start launching my projects when I'm working on them. And then we have it set up so that right now, it automatically docks when you open it for the first time. It automatically docks up in the upper left. And I'll probably, double click on my project to open my project while I'm working on it. We've got lots of thoughts about other, I've got a wish list. I'm not going to share them all, but things that I would like to have in here that make it easier for me to work on my project. And then, of course, as we mentioned, we can easily search for and add packages. DQMH is a good one. I'm not going to install it right now, but I can, click on that. I can star it and say how much I love it. That's great. We can, open the package info window and click over here and I can, send the Delacorp team, I can post ideas or get to their homepage. So that's a great way for me to provide feedback on the package and, search for stuff. So this search window too communicates with essentially kind of a cloud search on VIPM.io, and it finds all kinds of stuff. Did that answer your question? Was there something else you wanted me to answer, Javier?
No, I think just given
I can uninstall a package.
To me,
I didn't show anybody this. Yeah.
To me, it is a really cool and snappy way of just finding new packages and new tools.
Yeah. And
it just feels like I don't have to deal with a bunch of the things that you typically would deal with. Maybe I know we have like 1 or 2 slides to end, but there was a question about, and I know this was in one of our conversations, Jim, about it would be great if you can snap kind of the Dragon window with the project window or combine them somehow so that they're tied together.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things that we could do with that. Obviously, we're kind of above LabVIEW, but we're kind of taking control of LabVIEW. We actually do have project integration right now. That's how we're managing switching the palettes and stuff like that. So, we can definitely, provide more hooks inside of the project environment, maybe even to allow, this to easily be closed and reopened when it's needed, add, something to the toolbar. And so I guess what I would say too is, if people are interested in this, hopefully soon we're going to have a version that people can try out and play with. And then we're interested in getting people's feedback on what they like, don't like, and what they'd prefer. This is all still pretty new for us too.
I just posted a link to LinkedIn. So we have a specific VIPM LinkedIn page so that people can actually post comments and files there. Also Twitter, I'll try to find the Twitter handle. I think it's just at VIPM.
It's right? At VIPM, yeah.
So people can ask questions there. I would recommend they sign up for info and access to the beta. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Connected with people. One question there. I'll just mention it so that you and I don't forget it, Jim. But
yeah.
Somebody was asking about managing nested virtual environments. So my head is already trying to wrap around that, but
the dragon is eating its tail. Yeah.
Well, and the dragon may have a nest, so it's interesting.
Sure.
So that's I'll just mention that I don't know if we have an answer for that, and that was from a year. So do we want to maybe?
Well, so one thing I wanted to show too here. I'm gonna show a couple other things that were on my list. So the things that I've been showing so far are projects that are just like a VI that's calling some reuse code, right? One for the open source kind of community members, or anybody who's a CLA is probably building some reusable code and packaging it. And so what we also have here is, and this is loading the virtual environment. This project knows about the package build specification. So this is the JKI simple localization library, which is one of our open source libraries that does localization of front panels. And so the build output of this project is not an executable standalone application. It's actually a package. So what we can do is from right here, we can launch the package build spec and start the build. And so this package, its source code, if I open the project here, we can see this project source code is calling VIs that are themselves packages that are then installed in a virtual environment underneath this project folder. So that's really cool. That's a really important and common use case that I'll mention. And then I guess the last thing that I wanted to leave people with is like the possibility of, okay, so imagine that you check out a project from source code control. And imagine this project uses DACMX and other NI software. Maybe you don't have the right version of LabVIEW installed, and you double click on the package configuration, and it's inspecting it and looking at the system to see what you have installed here. And it says there's required packages that need to be installed, and maybe it gives you a little more information here. I'm just going to continue, but imagine you need to install LabVIEW, DACMX, and other stuff before you can launch this, and it does that all for you. And literally, you've got a virgin computer that you pull the code from GitHub, and Project Dragon can make sure you have all the right stuff installed to start working on that. That's in my opinion, that's pretty cool. So yeah.
Yep, I agree. I agree with that. Let's see if there are any more questions that fly in before we leave. Yeah, so Justin is saying the linkage to NIPM would also be very cool. I agree. Danielle is asking if this could be the beginning of an inter-package type dependency.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I mean, if you've got a library that calls DACMX, there's no reason why it couldn't declare that in the package as well.
I agree. Somebody's asking about what happens if you open the project outside of the virtual environment, save it, and then open it outside of the virtual environment?
Yeah, no.
There's some confusion there.
It'll be fine. So the virtual environment is actually below the project, and all the project VIs link relative to it. So you don't have to have the project open for things to be correctly linked to the VIs in the virtual environment. If you're doing IDE stuff like the palettes and things like that, that's where it's helpful to open it up inside the project.
Cool, and I think Tom is joining.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much, Jim and Javert. It was a really great presentation. Unfortunately, we do need to stop there.
Oh, we're all done. That was it. bit.ly/Project Dragon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.